Good morning everybody, welcome to Sunday's edition of Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross. As you can see, I'm sporting a very short new haircut, much to the dismay of some of my fans it seems. However, this morning's programme is on something a little more serious than my haircut, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about two items that came up in the news in the last 24 hours. Now, the first one that came to my attention, and I'm sure that many other independent supporters and interested people around Scotland will have watched the Andrew Marr show this morning and seen Nicola Sturgeon being interviewed. And the impression that I came away with, and I can see that a number of other people have come away with the same impression, is that it seems, at least, that independence has got further away and not closer. The implications of what Nicola was saying this morning are that we're still in this waiting phase. We're waiting to see what happens with Brexit. The problem is that if we wait too long, then there, as Andrew Marr was pointing out, there may not be time for a referendum. However, the government, I'm talking about the Scottish government here, has tabled a new bill which will create a piece of legislation which effectively freezes the Scottish powers in place. It's a bit like sort of making time stand still for a period. Now, the idea of this piece of legislation is to ensure that while things are being sorted out, let's say that Brexit is going ahead as we know on the 29th of March 2019, and the European Union has indicated that it will be giving the United Kingdom a period of approximately 21 months in which to continue its fine-tuning of the deal that it wants to do. And during that 21 months, according to the European Union, the existing situation will be that we will be de facto still a member of the EU. Even though we've Brexited, we will still be bound by the rules of the European Union until that deal has been done. What's not clear at the moment is whether that 21 months will give adequate protection to the Scottish Parliament at Holyrood from the repeal bill, the European Union withdrawal bill, which is currently being steamrollered through both Westminster houses, the Lords and the Commons. Now, as you know, the withdrawal bill repatriates or brings back powers to the United Kingdom which are currently held in Brussels, powers over things like fishing and farming. Now, those two things, those two powers, would normally rest with the Scottish Government as devolved issues because they have no national significance in terms of Westminster's power over them, because they're probably better controlled anyway at local level. However, those powers and many others are not going to be returned to Scotland under the repeal bill. They'll be taken back to Westminster along with every single other power. Now, I'm not talking just about laws. There's a difference between a law and a power. A law is something which binds people legally to do something within their own country, within their own jurisdiction. Now, in Scotland we have our own law system. In England they have a separate system. So it's not European laws that we're talking about, it's the powers of nations to control individual parts of their economies. In our case it would be fishing and farming. Might be other things in there as well that we would want to keep. However, and this is the important thing we all need to remember, the repeal bill, or the European Union withdrawal bill as it's now properly known, gives the Westminster government the right to take all of the powers, every single one of them, to Westminster. And that theoretically could mean all the powers from Holyrood as well, because the Brexit bill itself, where it takes us out of the European Union against the wishes of the majority of people in Scotland, is anti-democratic. And in Scotland at least, the majority of people were not in favour of this, but are being forced out of the European Union as a result. So it's a very messy picture, and the problem is that the timing of everything is dependent on what happens between the United Kingdom and the European Union. Now, as we know, we'll be Brexiting on the 29th of March next year. Now, that officially means that Britain is no longer at least technically, a member of the European Union. The question that arises is, will the repeal bill or the European Union withdrawal bill come into effect at that moment? Because if it does, regardless of whether we get a 21-month extension, if you like, to our European Union membership, if the repeal bill comes into effect at that moment, then we have lost control of our ability to keep our Scottish Parliament in place, because one law will supersede another. As soon as a repeal bill passes the House of Commons and becomes a piece of legislation, then it's enacted. As soon as it's then enacted, then we lose the ability to control everything in Scotland, because all the powers will then be vested in Westminster and they can do whatever they like with them. And I've seen, probably you've seen this yourself, there's a new small group of anti-Scottish unionists who have decided to petition for the Scottish Parliament to be abolished, and they've started saying this publicly on their little website now, claiming that, and this made me laugh last week, that each MSP in Scotland cost twice as much as an MP in England. And the reason it made me laugh was the way they did their arithmetic, comparatively speaking, was ridiculous. They're trying to make out that over 1,200 MPs and lords in Westminster were somehow a better use of Scottish taxpayers' money than 129 MSPs in Holyrood was. It's obviously a ridiculous claim. However, the fact that they're making this statement on the social media now and putting this idea out among their other British nationalist supporters is the fact that there is definitely now an appetite among British nationalists, at least, to abolish Holyrood, and that's precisely the danger that we now face. I've said this before, I said this at the beginning of this year. Nicola Sturgeon has said today that she is going to put in place this bill which will freeze Scottish powers as they are. In other words, it will ensure that Scotland retains all of its devolved powers during the period in which we are negotiating with the European Union. It can be challenged by the United Kingdom and it could be challenged in the High Court, but it does slow down the process and it will prevent the British government from simply steamrolling right through and abolishing the Holyrood Parliament without any kind of warning at all, because having a point of law like this, a piece of legislation passed by a devolved Parliament, means that the High Courts would need to become involved. There would be a lengthy legal battle between the Scottish Government and the British Government in London over which of these two, shall we say, pieces of legislation is the supreme. Is it the Brexit bill or is it this Scottish bill to protect Scotland's powers? So Nicola Sturgeon is trying to put in place a handbrake which will keep Holyrood parked while we negotiate. But does it mean that we will be not Brexiting, well, Brexiting is the wrong word, that we will not be voting on independence until 2020? I don't think so. Andrew Marr came out with something which I thought was rather telling, which was he said there wouldn't be time for a referendum in the months prior to Brexit. But Andrew Marr seems to be labouring under the misapprehension that a referendum needs A, permission from London, which it doesn't because we've got a mandate, and B, that it's going to take 2 years this time. It's not going to take 2 years this time because there isn't time to do that. So what will happen in 2018, or what's likely to happen, is that while all of these machinations are ongoing, while the Scottish Government is trying to protect Holyrood and keep it protected while we vote in our IndyRef, and the British Government is intent obviously on trying not to allow that to happen. So this battle's going on in the background. What we should be doing, and what the rest of the independence movement will be doing, is building the new case for independence right now. The Scottish Government is putting in place the kinds of institutions that we need for the new nation to actually set up and start running immediately without any interruption to business. Now that means the central bank, so the transfer of funds from the Bank of England into the central bank would happen instantaneously. That money would be available to finance the daily running of Scotland as it would be under the British system, but except for the fact that we would have all of our money in our central bank and not have it top sliced down in London. So these are the kinds of things that will be put in place over the next year or so. Personally, I think the independence referendum is going to happen in late 2018 for the simple reason that Sturgeon said herself that she believes, and this is what has been said by Theresa May and the European Union, that there will be the heads of an agreement by October of this year. Now, the heads of an agreement is really an agreement to agree the basics. That is, the broad brushstrokes of an agreement will be in place. So we will know whether it's hard Brexit, in other words, we're just leaving without any deal at all, which I think is unlikely, a moderately severe Brexit where there has been some horse trading. The European Union has perhaps come a little way towards the United Kingdom and given some small concessions. Now that might be something like a customs union to allow the movement of, say, holidaymakers and tourists around the UK and the European Union, and also to allow the free flow of goods in and out without too much paperwork. But that might be all they get. However, if that's the case, then that's the case. It's a moderately difficult Brexit, but we would still face the problem of increased costs for importing and exporting, and that's almost inevitable with anything that happens. The softest Brexit possible, in other words, a free trade agreement, is probably going to have these sorts of conditions on it, that there will be limited access to the European market, and there might or might not be a customs union. They've already said there probably isn't going to be a customs union, so there's going to be some horse trading. But the most appalling thing that we could have probably would be the final option, that the hardest Brexit possible is going to be leaving with no deal and having to trade with all the European countries, all 27 of them, based on the World Trade Organization trade rules, which imply very large tax tariffs on anything coming into the United Kingdom or being exported into Europe. And what this means is that both we in the United Kingdom will end up paying up to 25 to 45% more for European goods, and Europeans paying something similar as an increase on British goods. Now, what that does to an economy is it stops trade. It slows it down to a trickle because it becomes too expensive for people to buy and sell the goods into and out of each other's countries. That leaves only perhaps the ultimate luxury items that people cannot normally afford. So, what's the roundup of all this? How do you put this to bed and decide what to think about it? Well, I can only give you my own opinion, my own analysis of this. My own opinion is that sometime around September, October of this year, the SNP will decide on the IndyRef date. Now, it might be at that exact moment. It might be just the run up to Christmas this coming year. It might be sometime very early in the new year, well before Easter and well before the Brexit cut-off date of the 29th of March. But it will be timed, and I believe it will be timed in such a way that there's a very short lead up to it, because the campaign for this independence referendum has been going on since 2014, and in that time, without any announcement of a referendum, we have already gained 5% swing to the yes side. Now that tells you that the independence movement that we have built up, not the SNP, that we have built up, and our media, our television shows like this little show, like Alex Salmond's big show on Russia Today, and the newspapers like The National, Scotland on Sunday, the magazines like Bella Caledonia, the debunking sites like Wings Over Scotland, and countless other places that I could mention, and smaller sites that have cropped up everywhere. All of these things are making a difference to people's opinions. And we're not saying don't listen to the media on the television at all. What I would say to you is always ask yourself the question about what you're watching. Who wants me to know this piece of information? It might be a true piece of news, but why do they want me to know this? And what is the inference they are making about this particular piece of news? What are they trying to get me to think? And is there something else going on that they're not reporting that I really want to know about? And make sure that when you do look for news in the next few months about Scotland and about its constitutional future, that you look at more than one source. So go to RT, go to Al Jazeera, who are particularly good at foreign news, incidentally. They're extremely good at it, and it's very much more balanced. And also look at the European media, if you can translate it, okay? Also listen to the Irish media. RTE is quite good for a very balanced look at what's going on in the UK, and we never ever see it. You ever notice that? The RTE is almost never talked about in the United Kingdom. There's a very good reason for that, and that's because the British government doesn't really want you to listen to Russian television. However, if you do that, that's fine. So I reckon that we will be having our independence vote towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, because if you leave it any longer than that, the risk to the devolved settlement in Scotland, in other words, the risk to the Parliament, will be too great, and I don't believe that Nicola Sturgeon wants to gamble with the future of Holyrood. It's not a talking shop anymore. It is the site of government for Scotland, and it has been so for the past 10 years. It's where the big decisions are made. It's where the running of the country happens, and I don't believe now that the SNP has got enough time to dilly-dally anymore, because if you think about this, the Labour Party today has said, in Scotland that is, the British Labour Party in the Scottish Parliament is saying that they will bring a no-confidence vote in the draft budget, the Scottish draft budget. They claim that there is a £700 million shortfall that should be going to paying for public services, and this represents a massive austerity cut to Scotland's budget. Well, it is a massive austerity cut to Scotland's budget, but it's not coming from the SNP. And I would like to ask the Labour Party in Scotland, since they're going to vote no confidence in this particular draft budget, how the hell do they feel they can raise the £700 million necessary to pay the massive pay increases that they want to see in the public sector without hurting the economy? How are you going to do it? So Richard Leonard, answer this question. If you don't believe the Scottish budget should go through, then how would you, if you were in charge of the Scottish Government, how would you raise the money to fill that £700 million shortfall that you claim is the problem? So there are a lot of different pressures on the Scottish Government at the moment. We know that the British nationalist parties, Labour, the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, are going to keep blaming the SNP for austerity that's being forced on us by the London government. They're basically saying our parties are starving Scotland of money. What are you going to do about it? And it's a ridiculous statement to make for any politician. There's no way that any government in the position of the Scottish Government can do anything about the austerity that's being forced on us. So bear all of these facts in mind, but remember, the clock is ticking, and I pretty substantially believe in my own mind that we have to have our Indy ref at the end of this year, because I don't think that the Scottish Government's plans to freeze the powers will take that long for the British Government to break down legally and overrule. I think it could be a matter of 1 or 2 months, and they would have it demolished in the courts in London, and then we would be open to this whole idea of Holyrood being demolished and every one of the MSPs being made redundant because they're an unnecessary expense. These are my fears. Nicola did a good performance. It was steady, it was sensible. She didn't rise to the bait too much. I noticed that Andrew Marr was a lot more reserved in his questioning of her this time. He didn't bang on about independence as much. He was more interested, in fact, in how Nicola was going to deal with Brexit. He wanted to know what she thought of it and what the Scottish Government was doing. And the Scottish Government is actually looking at the damage that Brexit will do to the Scottish economy. Then he asked her about fisheries, and he said, have you done a sectoral analysis? Now, Nicola said no, she hadn't done a sectoral analysis, but then again, the Scottish fishing industry is tiny by comparison with something like the whisky industry. Scottish fishing industry brought in, I think, what was it, £68 million or something like that last year. It's minuscule, and it's minuscule because the Tories have bargained away Scottish fishing grounds, and they're going to do it again, and the fishermen voted for the Tories, and they're going to get their fishing grounds bargained away again. They just don't seem to understand that. Now farmers in the northeast of Scotland are complaining that they're going to lose their subsidies, but they voted for the Tories and they wanted Brexit. They're getting what they voted for, no subsidies. There are a lot of things happening in the moment which make me hopeful though, but the main one that makes me hopeful is the fact that without any independence referendum called whatsoever, we've gained 5% since 2014. Now we just need to gain about another 5 or 10% to make us comfortable. I would say we need to reach about 60%. But as Brexit starts to unravel and the nature of Brexit begins to become apparent, and I think that's going to happen about September time, we're going to find out exactly what the European Union will allow us to have. If the British keep trying to say, we're going to walk away if you don't give us a deal, then the European Union will say, well, walk away then, because they hold all the cards. 27 other nations have a massive amount of clout. Britain, one nation, no clout whatsoever. So I think you can do the maths yourself here. It's likely that we'll get what we're given, and what will be given is a moderately bad Brexit. It's not going to be a cliff edge Brexit. We'll have a little bit of time to ease into it, but it's not going to be good, and it's going to hurt our economy substantially. So in a nutshell, I think Nicola is saying keep waiting, but by the end of this summer we should know something. And I think when the SNP does act, it's going to happen extremely fast. It's not going to be a long drawn out process this time. There is no time for that. It will be fast and hard hitting, and it will be a blitzkrieg across the media that we do have to show people the difference between independence and Brexit, the good and the bad. Brexit is going to wipe out your industries. Independence is going to guarantee their security. Nothing will get worse with independence. Everything will get worse with Brexit. Anyway, have a good Sunday. I know this is a lot to take in and it's a complex subject. Any comments, as usual, make them in the normal way after the show. Let me know your opinions. I have 1 or 2 suggestions for shows which I'm going to do later on this week, and I'll explain more about those later on, but there's some very good suggestions coming in from other people, and thank you all for making these suggestions. I'm trying to make a note of them so I can keep up with it. At the moment there are some plans for Indycar to do a studio show, which I hope might eventually be once a week. The studio show will, we hope, be done by Independence Live, and at the moment the working title for that is Indie Studio, and it will take the form of an interview programme with myself and guests of one sort or another, not just politicians but people prominent in the fight for independence. So we're talking about guys like Derek Bateman, Leslie Riddoch, Gordon McIntyre Kemp, people like that. People in the news on a daily basis who are putting forward new ideas all the time and coming up with what we need to be an independent country. So hopefully in the next few weeks, sometime in the early part of this year, we should be able to produce some kind of regular show every week called Indie Studio. I'll continue with IndyCar broadcasts as well in the normal way, but I'm hoping maybe Friday we'll have some kind of evening show where I'm in the studio with guests, and I'm hoping that will happen soon. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. It's at least not too bad a day out here. I'm looking forward to getting a couple of driving lessons done without any snow or rain, but I'll speak to you on Monday, and bye for now.